From the outside, their marriage looked flawless. Luxury cars parked in a guarded driveway, glass walls overlooking a private skyline, dinners that cost more than most people's monthly income. The husband moved through this world like a king, confident and unquestioned. He was powerful, wealthy, and deeply accustomed to control. In his mind, success wasn't just about money. It was about dominance. And the easiest place to exercise that dominance was at home. Money was his favorite weapon. Every bill, every account, every luxury flowed through him. He paid for everything, and he made sure it was known. Subtle comments slipped into conversations, reminders of who provided, who decided, who owned. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Control came wrapped in calm authority, in numbers on screens and signatures on documents. Love, for him, was something managed, measured, and monitored. His wife existed beside him like a carefully chosen accessory. Elegant, always composed, effortlessly intelligent. She fit perfectly into the image he wanted to project. At events, she smiled at the right moments and spoke only when necessary. People assumed she was lucky. Few noticed how often her opinions were dismissed, how decisions about her life were made without her input. She was included, but never consulted. At home, the imbalance was quieter, but sharper. He spoke, she listened. He decided, she adapted. Yet beneath her calm exterior, her silence was not emptiness. She observed everything. The way he tightened his grip whenever he felt challenged, the way his confidence relied on her dependence. She understood the system he had built far better than he realized. There was tension in the air, thin and constant, hidden beneath polished surfaces and expensive furniture. A marriage held together not by partnership, but by control. And while he believed he was the one holding all the power, he never considered how dangerous it was to underestimate someone who learned to survive quietly. Long before she became his wife, she had learned how to listen more than she spoke. She grew up in a world that rewarded loud confidence and overlooked quiet intelligence. So she adapted. Her education was impressive. Degrees earned with discipline. Nights spent studying systems most people found intimidating. Finance, contracts, risk management. These weren't foreign concepts to her. They were tools. She simply learned early that showing too much capability made people uncomfortable, especially powerful men. Her husband never asked about her past in detail. He assumed her success came from marrying well, not from the years she spent understanding how money truly moved. Friends followed his lead. At gatherings, they complimented her appearance, her grace, her patience. No one asked what she thought about markets or mergers. No one imagined she could read a balance sheet faster than they could skim a menu. Being underestimated became her permanent role. She didn't correct them. Silence gave her space to observe. She noticed patterns others missed, the clauses people ignored, the loopholes hidden in plain sight, the way systems depended on trust more than strength. While her husband boasted about his empire, she quietly learned its structure. She paid attention to names, timelines, signatures. Knowledge accumulated slowly, deliberately, in private. She asked careful questions, never threatening his ego. He mistook curiosity for dependence. When she reviewed documents beside him, he assumed she was admiring his work, not memorizing the framework beneath it. Every dismissal taught her something valuable, how invisible she truly was in his eyes. Society loved simple stories. Powerful man, beautiful, compliant wife. No one questioned it because it made sense to them. But beneath her calm smile lived a strategic mind that understood one critical truth. Control wasn't about volume or force. It was about timing, preparation, and knowing when to let others believe they were winning. And she was very patient. It started as something small, almost ordinary. A passing comment about wanting more independence, said without accusation. She mentioned making a decision on her own. Nothing dramatic, just a reminder that she was capable of standing on her own feet. The room shifted instantly. His expression hardened, not with anger at first, but with disbelief. To him, independence sounded like ingratitude. He laughed it off, sharp and dismissive, turning the conversation into a lecture. He reminded her of everything he provided, every comfort she enjoyed because of him. The more calmly she spoke, the more threatened he felt. Her composure unsettled him. She wasn't begging, wasn't apologizing, and that silence felt like defiance. The argument escalated quietly, dangerously. Words like control and respect hung in the air. He accused her of forgetting her place. She pointed out, carefully, evenly, that a marriage wasn't ownership. That was when his ego took the hit. The challenge wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. He ended the conversation abruptly, already deciding how to respond. In his world, consequences were swift and financial. Money had always restored order. As he walked away, irritation transformed into certainty. He would remind her who held the power. He would show her how quickly comfort disappeared without him. In his mind, it wasn't cruelty. It was discipline, a lesson she clearly needed. He believed she would panic, apologize, and fall back into line the moment she felt the weight of dependence. He was convinced she had nowhere to go, nothing without his resources. What he didn't realize was that the argument hadn't shaken her. It had confirmed everything. He didn't hesitate. Sitting alone in his office, surrounded by screens and numbers he believed defined power, he made the calls with practiced ease. One instruction after another. Credit card suspended, access restricted, limits reduced to 0. Each confirmation felt like a click of a lock sliding into place. Control restored. Order reestablished. He leaned back in his chair, a slow sense of satisfaction settling in his chest. This was familiar territory for him. Money had never failed to solve a problem. He imagined her realizing what he had done. Standing at a counter, card declined, confusion turning into panic. The thought reassured him. Dependence always revealed the truth. He told himself this wasn't punishment, just a reminder, a temporary correction. When she finally noticed, she didn't react the way he expected. There was no raised voice, no frantic questions, no desperate knock on his door. She simply looked at him, listening as he explained his decision with calm authority. He watched closely, waiting for emotion to crack through her composure. It never came. She nodded once, quietly, as if he'd informed her of a change in the weather. No argument, no tears, just acceptance. That calm unsettled him for a brief moment, but he dismissed it quickly. To him, silence meant surrender. He mistook restraint for weakness, composure for defeat. He felt victorious, certain he had drawn the line clearly enough this time. Whatever illusion of independence she'd entertained was over. Without access to money, she would remember who controlled the ground beneath her feet. She turned away without another word, her expression unreadable. He didn't notice the steadiness of her hands, or the absence of fear in her eyes. He didn't ask where she was going or what she was thinking. In his confidence, he failed to recognize the most dangerous thing of all. She wasn't shocked. She was ready. The house was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that made him lean forward, expecting a protest, a shout, anything to break the stillness. But she said nothing. No pleading, no accusations, no anger. Just a calm, measured quiet that seemed almost unnatural in its patience. He watched her, half expecting the facade to crumble, the panic or outrage to spill out. Her composure unnerved him more than any argument could. He was used to reactions, to people flinching when he exerted control. But her stillness was different. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was observation. And the way she held herself, the quiet confidence in her eyes, made him pause. For the first time in years, he felt the smallest twinge of uncertainty. Yet he convinced himself it was nothing. He told himself she was stunned, temporarily out of options, powerless without money. He walked away, already imagining the next move to reinforce his dominance. Her silence, he reasoned, would soon crumble under pressure. He couldn't see the truth beneath her calm demeanor. While he dismissed it, something far larger was unfolding. Years of careful observation, patience, and hidden knowledge had quietly positioned her to act. Every move he believed gave him control had, in fact, created the perfect conditions for her next step. The silence he misread as weakness was, in reality, a prelude to upheaval, one that would catch him entirely off guard. He believed he had the upper hand. He had no idea how close he was to losing it. The bank had always been his kingdom, a fortress of influence and numbers he believed he fully controlled. Yet quietly, almost invisibly, She had been carving her own presence within it. No board meeting had passed without her meticulous notes, no quarterly report without her subtle annotations. To him, she appeared polite and attentive, always following along, never questioning. But beneath that composed exterior, she had been learning every nuance of the institution, every loophole, every opportunity. Over the years, she quietly acquired small investments, shares that seemed inconsequential at the time, hidden behind layers of trust accounts and proxy arrangements. Each acquisition was strategic, designed not for immediate control, but to establish a foundation for influence that no one would suspect. She attended seminars, met with advisors, and built quiet alliances with staff who respected her intelligence and discretion. All of it was invisible to him, because he never thought she could, or would, engage with the bank on her own terms. Her knowledge was not theoretical. She understood cash flows, credit lines, board voting procedures, and regulatory nuances better than most executives. She had memorized the bylaws, the ownership structure, the chain of approvals. And when he cut her off financially, he knew nothing of how close she was to turning the tables. What appeared to be dependence had been a facade. While he boasted about how indispensable his oversight was, she had been quietly building influence, learning how to operate the system without raising suspicion. Every small decision, every quiet observation, every patient question had brought her closer to a position of real power, one that, if exercised, would render him almost powerless in comparison. By the time the moment of revelation came, she wouldn't be acting rashly or impulsively. She would execute with precision, knowledge, and timing that only years of careful preparation could achieve. The empire he assumed he controlled so completely had, unknowingly, been infiltrated by the very person he thought was powerless. And when the switch flipped, there would be no way to stop her. He leaned back in his chair, smug and self-satisfied, the weight of victory pressing comfortably against his chest. Every account frozen, every card cut off, every system temporarily locked. He believed the message had been delivered loud and clear. She was powerless now, entirely dependent, and for the first time he felt the thrill of total control. A small smile crept across his face as he imagined her realizing she had nowhere to turn, no means to challenge him. This, he thought, was the perfect lesson in dominance. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the city, the wife moved with focused precision. Her calm demeanor belied the storm of activity around her. Contracts were reviewed, signatures secured, and phone calls made with careful timing. Every detail mattered. Every authorization needed to align exactly, with no room for error. Her fingers traced through spreadsheets, her mind calculating contingencies, ensuring nothing could fail. She had anticipated this moment for months, quietly positioning herself to act decisively at the exact minute he believed she had none. The irony was almost poetic. While he basked in imagined victory, she was executing the plan that would strip him of the very power he flaunted. Each tick of the clock brought the takeover closer, each precise action reinforcing her quiet but unstoppable ascent. He believed he had all the control, yet unknowingly, the leverage was slipping from his hands. And then it would be too late. Every second counted. While he congratulated himself on his dominance, she prepared the final moves that would cement her authority. In a world ruled by appearances, the most powerful shift was happening silently, invisibly, right under his nose. His arrogance made him blind, and her patience made her unstoppable. By the time he realized the truth, the game would already be over. He arrived at the bank that morning with the usual confidence, the air of a man accustomed to unquestioned authority. The building gleamed in polished marble. The staff greeted him with practiced respect, and he expected the usual routine, nods, papers, and decisions that bent his will. Every step he took, every glance, reinforced the illusion of control he had cultivated for decades. But as he entered the boardroom, the illusion shattered instantly. The room buzzed with attention he hadn't anticipated. Lawyers and executives sat upright, poised with documents and laptops, their expression professional but unreadable. At first, he assumed it was a routine meeting, perhaps a new audit or investment discussion. He never expected the storm that awaited him. Then the announcements began. Contracts he had assumed were under his sole authority were revealed to be jointly signed or transferred, with her name legally recognized in ways he had overlooked. Executives cited her directives. Her strategic decisions have been quietly implemented over the past weeks. The room hummed with confirmation emails, signed authorizations, and board votes that shifted the balance of power. Each revelation struck like a blow to his ego. He caught sight of her, standing at the side, calm and composed, her presence commanding more authority than he had ever anticipated. She didn't speak loudly or demand attention, but her role was undeniable. Her influence radiated across the room, and every action taken confirmed it. This wasn't chaos. It was precision. The control he assumed was absolute had been quietly eroded, and now the world could see it unravel. Panic and disbelief crept into his chest as he realized the magnitude of what had happened. Every confident step, every dismissive comment about her capabilities, every assumption of helplessness had been a miscalculation. Publicly, he was losing ground, and with it, the narrative he had long controlled. By the time the board meeting concluded, the power had shifted irreversibly. His dominance, once unquestioned, was now challenged in full view of every executive, lawyer, and observer. For the first time, he understood that authority wasn't just about control. It was about foresight, preparation, and recognizing intelligence you once overlooked. And she had all of it. The takeover moved faster than he could process. One moment, he believed he had orchestrated the entire morning. The next, he realized the very systems he controlled were slipping from his grasp. Accounts that once obeyed his commands now resisted, frozen in an instant, showing alerts and authorizations he had never seen. His fingers hovered over his phone, useless against the meticulously executed maneuvers she had set in motion. Executives and managers, previously deferential, now acted according to her instructions. Decisions he assumed were locked under his name were reversed with a precision that left him reeling. Every email, every signed directive, every automatic transaction confirmed the horrifying truth. The leverage he relied upon for decades had quietly shifted into her hands. The tools he had wielded as weapons of control were no longer his. Panic crept into his chest, replacing the arrogance that had guided him so confidently through life. The walls of certainty he had built around his power were crumbling before him, not with force, but with strategy, patience, and knowledge he had never recognized. He realized in fragments that he had underestimated her at every turn, dismissing her calm demeanor and quiet observation as weakness. As he watched authority transfer in real time, a new, unfamiliar sensation took root. Fear. Not for money, not for reputation, but for the raw vulnerability of losing control in a way that no threat or rival could ever achieve. His entire empire had shifted in minutes, orchestrated by the one person he believed powerless. By the time he understood the scope of what had happened, the takeover was complete. Arrogance had vanished, leaving only the sharp, bitter taste of reality. Systems, money, and power mean nothing when you underestimate the quiet strength of someone who has been patiently waiting to act. And she had acted flawlessly, without hesitation. He stormed into the room, the weight of humiliation and disbelief pressing heavily on his chest. Every step toward her felt like a countdown to confrontation. Yet he found himself hesitant, uncertain, an unfamiliar feeling gnawing at the edges of his confidence. This wasn't a boardroom argument where his title and wealth carried unquestioned authority. This was different. The tables had turned. The balance of power had shifted, and he could feel it in the steady calm of her posture. She looked up at him without flinching. Calm, composed, utterly unshaken. Her eyes held neither fear nor malice, just clarity and quiet certainty. He expected defensiveness, anger, perhaps even tears, anything that would confirm her dependence. But there was nothing of the sort. Every word she would speak, he realized, could dismantle the arrogance he had carried for so long. "I warned you," she said softly, deliberately, "that underestimating people has consequences. You thought control was only about fear and money. It isn't." Her voice was measured, precise, but it cut deeper than any shouting ever could. He opened his mouth to argue, to reassert dominance, but the words died on his tongue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet authority in her tone, the intelligence behind every phrase, demanded recognition. Every assertion, every calm reminder of facts and evidence, landed with the weight of inevitability. For the first time, he understood that power wasn't about intimidation or threats. It was about preparation, strategy, and timing. She had anticipated every move, planned for every contingency, and acted flawlessly. Standing before her, he was stripped of the illusion that he had ever truly been in control. And as the realization sank in, the silence between them carried a weight far heavier than anger or fear ever could. She had won, not through aggression, but through certainty, skill, and quiet strength. She didn't rush to speak. Instead, she let the room settle, letting him sit in the aftermath of his own shock, feeling the weight of authority slipping from his grasp. Then, slowly, deliberately, she began to explain. Her voice was calm, measured, each word chosen with precision, carrying neither malice nor gloating. It was clarity, not vengeance, that filled her tone. "You believed you were in control," she said, "because you didn't see the preparation behind my silence. Every move, every observation, every small decision was deliberate. I needed to ensure my independence before challenging you. This wasn't about proving you wrong. It was about protecting myself." She leaned slightly forward, eyes unwavering. "I didn't act impulsively. I waited, studied, learned. Every assumption you made about me, every dismissal, allowed me to position myself exactly where I needed to be." He tried to interrupt, to protest, but she continued, her word a tide he couldn't resist. "You thought cutting off my access would weaken me. You believed fear would bring me back in line. But all it did was reveal how much planning I had already completed. Everything you see now was inevitable, not spontaneous. I didn't need to strike out of anger. I needed to ensure security, my security and, indirectly, the stability of your empire." She paused, letting the weight of her explanation sink in. Her strategy was revenge. It was careful, calculated self-preservation. Years of observation, learning, and patient positioning had led to this moment. The calm authority she displayed now was not the result of sudden empowerment. It was the inevitable outcome of preparation, foresight, and patience. For the first time, he realized that what he mistook for submission had always been strategy. What he assumed was helplessness had always been quiet strength. And that quiet strength had just undone his empire. The days that followed were merciless in their clarity. Word of the sudden shift in control spread quickly through the bank and the business world. Executives whispered in corridors, rivals smiled behind closed doors, and even allies looked at him differently. The man who had once moved through life with unquestioned authority now felt eyes on him, assessing, judging, noting every miscalculation. His fall was not violent or dramatic, but it was complete. Every decision reversed, every authority questioned, every flaw laid bare for all to see. Public humiliation, once a distant concept, became his daily companion. Through it all, she moved quietly, confidently, without arrogance or vindictiveness. She stepped into the role she had earned, not by shouting or demanding, but by demonstrating competence and calm. Board members deferred to her judgment. Staff sought her guidance, and investors recognized her strategic mind. Her authority was undeniable, yet it radiated in a way that commanded respect, not fear. Every action she took was deliberate, measured, and fair, showing that power could be exercised with intelligence and integrity rather than intimidation. He watched, powerless, as the woman he had dismissed navigated the empire he thought he controlled. Every calculated move she made reminded him of his misjudgment, his arrogance, and the danger of underestimating quiet strength. What he had seen as compliance had always been preparation. What he had dismissed as passivity had always been strategy. By the end of it, the lesson was clear. Authority isn't about loud declarations or fear. It's about skill, foresight, and the patience to wait for the right moment. She had taken what was rightfully hers, not through malice, but through precision, and in doing so, she had redefined power in a way he would never forget. The cost of underestimating her had been nothing less than his complete loss of control. With the dust of upheaval settling, she stepped into her new life with a quiet confidence that required no announcement. The bank, once a fortress of his control, now operated under her guidance, and her decisions reflected clarity, foresight, and respect for everyone involved. She didn't flaunt power or humiliate him. Her authority was evident in results, in efficiency, in the way people sought her counsel naturally. She had outgrown the need to dominate. Her freedom wasn't just financial, it was emotional. No longer constrained by his control, she could make choices that aligned with her values and vision. Meetings, investment, and strategies were no longer tools of compliance. They were instruments of creativity and influence. Staff and colleagues responded to her leadership not out of fear, but because they trusted her judgment. Respect followed naturally, built on competence and the quiet strength she had cultivated for years. She never sought revenge. There was no gloating, no displays of superiority. Her restraint became her power. Every decision she made, every move forward, underscored that true strength didn't need to be loud. It needed only to be precise, patient, and unwavering. Meanwhile, he existed in the aftermath, confronted by the consequences of underestimating someone he assumed powerless. She had not destroyed him, but she had moved beyond him. In the end, her victory wasn't just in control or success. It was in freedom, clarity, and the unwavering knowledge that true power belongs to those who prepare, observe, and act decisively when the moment arrives. She had taken nothing from him that she hadn't quietly earned, and in doing so, she had claimed a life entirely on her own terms. Power is often mistaken for control, and control for strength. He had believed that money, authority, and intimidation could bend the world to his will. He had relied on fear as a tool, on appearances as proof of dominance. Yet in the quiet moments that followed, the truth became undeniable. Control without insight is fragile, and authority without understanding is temporary. Her silence, once dismissed as weakness, had been a weapon more precise than any he could wield. Patience, observation, and preparation had allowed her to turn dependence into strategy, invisibility into influence, and restraint into power. While he acted with arrogance and immediacy, she moved with deliberation and foresight, showing that the most dangerous force is not aggression, but intelligence applied with purpose. Those who rely solely on money and fear forget that real power lies in anticipation, in learning, in positioning oneself to act decisively when the time is right. Her victory was not loud or vengeful. It was calculated, inevitable, and instructive. She had demonstrated that true authority comes from understanding systems, people, and consequences, not from the ability to dominate in the moment. The lesson is timeless. Never underestimate quiet strength. Do not mistake calm observation for submission. Do not confuse patience with passivity. Those who plan, prepare, and act with precision may appear powerless until the moment they reveal their full capability. And when that moment arrives, the results are irrevocable, leaving the overconfident and careless to face the consequences of underestimating what they cannot see. Control is fleeting. Intelligence, patience, and preparation endure. And in that enduring strength lies true power.